Welcome to Rolling with the Tides, navigating the waves of science and biohacking with CDJPepperz and friends. Now grab your NAD and a cup of coffee, and let's get into it. Quick disclaimer. Everything on this podcast is for educational and research purposes only. We are not doctors. This is not medical advice. Always talk to your physician before making any health decisions. Welcome to Rolling with the Tides. I'm Caitlin, also known as CDJPepperz. This is where we break down peptide research and ask better questions, all in educational context. So whether you're new or part of the Pepper fam, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. All right. In today's episode, we're getting into a topic that comes up in my lives all the time: how people think about building what's often called a peptide stack. Now, just to frame this correctly, this is an educational conversation. We're not building protocols. We're not making recommendations. We're talking about how these combinations are discussed, what people consider, and where a lot of the confusion comes in. Because the reality is, people don't usually look at one thing in isolation. They're trying to understand how different compounds are being explored together in the context of things like recovery, performance, and overall goals. So today we're breaking down the thinking behind it, not just the what, but the why. And today we've got Barry Napier. You probably know him though on TikTok as Barry the Biohacker. Barry's content sits right at the intersection of curiosity and experimentation, especially when it comes to peptides, performance, and how people are exploring optimization in this space. He's also the host of the podcast Optimize and Thrive, the show for body, mind, and business, where his mission is to help ambitious professionals optimize their health, master their mindset, and elevate their business success. What really stands out is how he approaches all of this in real time, testing, learning, and sharing the process. So I'm really excited to have him here. So let's get into it. Welcome, Barry.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for having me on the show. Super pumped to be here.
I'm super pumped to have you. A lot of people don't know that we're here at the genesis of Rolling with the Tides. Like, you told me all the things I needed to do to get a podcast going. So first off, I wanted to let that be known and say thank you, because now it's
You
here.
are welcome. Yes, I'm so glad that you have brought something so cool into the world. Podcasts are awesome. And I have done quite a few of them in my time. So I'm happy to share the wisdom on that. And I'm glad you took action and got it done.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my podcast Sherpa. That's how I refer to you now.
Love it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I asked you some ideas for today's podcast, and one of the ones that you came up with was stacking. And people, it's really funny, often ask me to do a science snack on stacking. And I tried to do a science snack once on stacking, and it got my account taken off of TikTok. So I was like, well, I guess we're not going to do that again. But when you brought up doing it for the pod, I was like, this might be the perfect opportunity to answer all those curious, inquiring minds about the science and the approach to building a stack in a venue where we're allowed to talk about it.
God, I know. I mean, I love TikTok, but sometimes it's just maddening in the censorship and the weird way that the algorithm will just take certain conversations offline, which is really unfortunate. But stacking is a great one because, many people when they get into peptides are typically coming in through a singular peptide. And for so many people, that's coming in through a GLP. And as that magical compound has its life-changing effects on a person, the question invariably goes like, what other peptides are there, right? And a person can easily go down the rabbit hole and find themselves with, 10 different compounds that they've purchased or more. And they're wondering like, how do I run these? What should I run? What should I combine? What shouldn't I combine? And it can quickly become a little bit overwhelming, a little bit of a jumbled mess. So I think the art and the science of an intelligent stack, which is basically polypharmacy, right? We're going to combine different things together to create some synergy and accelerate our goals, is awesome. But it's oftentimes, it's usually that second, maybe that second step on the ladder for people, or that second step on the stairway to getting into peptides.
Right. Exactly. So, where to start? Like you said, a lot of people come in already on a GLP, and if it's not a GLP, I always often find a lot of people's gateway pep is BPC
Mhm.
157.
Yep.
So it's either one of the two. They either had aches and pains or an injury and a GLP. And I feel like those are the two gateway compounds because you see results with them relatively quickly and profoundly. So that's when people are usually like, I want more of this.
Yeah, it's like,
So,
whoa, these
right.
work.
Yes. Yes. Like, I talk about this a lot in the episodes, but I'm taking the certification at the Seeds Institute for Research and Performance, and they typically add a peptide to the stack when they're stacking for the buy-in of the patient when they talk about it, because it's often medical professionals there. So the foundational one is usually one that does show a quick result, so that because an important part of stacking, what a lot of people don't realize, isn't as much of how many peps can I stack, it's the compliance. It's doing the stack
Uh,
consistently. You can't just like do GHKCU once a week and expect to see life-changing results. Like certain peptides need a little bit more commitment than that. GLPs are great because they're once a week, but not all of them are once a week. So you need
yeah,
the buy-in first and
for
foremost.
sure. You absolutely. And there's different, you bring up seeds, and there's different educators out there, and medical practitioners and influencers and thought leaders and just people with opinions, and everyone seems to have a slightly different idea around, what is an ideal stack and how many compounds should be combined together. And I would broadly say that you could fall into one to two like broad camps, right? On the one hand, you have a camp of people who's like really likes to see singular compound expression, like what does this one thing do, and let's take it low and slow, and let's not add a lot of complexity in, especially in situations where maybe that a person has a complex kind of situation going on, health situation, there could be some wisdom there, right? If you're dealing with a lot of different pharmaceuticals, a lot of different other health issues, your risk of contraindications and weird stuff interacting, that can definitely go up. But so on one side, you have people who are like, minimal, and then on the other side, you have people who definitely fall into more of that polypharmacy, like, more is better. Let's come up with whatever, like that ideal synergy is, and if that's 6 compounds, great. If it's 12 compounds, awesome. But those are kind of the continuum, and I would say, for the most part, I fall somewhere in the middle, and it oftentimes tracks back to what is a person's goal? What is their primary thing they're looking to do? And then usually underneath that, they might have a secondary goal or a tertiary goal. And then where's their starting line? What's the starting line? Like, where are they at, from a hormonal standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint? Where are they at from a body composition standpoint? And the question you raised, like compliance, like how much other things are they doing? What's happening in their life? I think you got to look at all of it, right? And so, I think the perfect stack begins with asking the question of like, what do you want to achieve, and where are you starting from?
Mhm. Mhm. Because if you're not starting from a place where your lifestyle is gonna complement these compounds, you're already starting off on the wrong foot, in my opinion. Like, you're already doing a disservice. Like, most of these peptides are gonna amplify things that are already there, the bottlenecks that are already there, the problems that are already there. So if you're expecting to like, on a GLP, yeah, you might lose 100 pounds, but you'll stall out if you don't change your eating habits, or you might try to, I don't know, what's another compound we can use it as an example that like a growth hormone secretagogue. Like if you're not putting in some meaningful exercise and movement when you're using a growth hormone secretagogue, you're not going to see like the muscle definition changes, the body recomp changes.
Absolutely. I think we have this kind of desire oftentimes as people to fast forward and skip past the boring foundational stuff. Give me the thing, man. And so if it comes in a shot versus a pill now, and that we call it peptide, but it's going to do this thing and it's going to be like amazing and I don't have to do anything else, heck yeah, like sign me up, right? And so all of us as human beings, I mean, there's a tendency towards, wanting to just fast forward to the end result, right? But when we skip foundations, we really set ourselves up for failure in a long-term sense, and potentially in a short term where we just don't get nearly as much from some of these compounds as we could.
Mm,
And primarily, that's because if we look at what a peptide is, fundamentally, it's a signaling molecule, right? It's a messenger. And so, if our environmental system is just full of inflammation and all kinds of dysfunction and systemic issues, very hard to get those messages through, right?
mhm.
And also, if we're not accounting for other powerful systems in our body, like our hormonal state, right? And to your point, like our fundamental activity levels, and then food, which ultimately I think we forget is probably the most powerful lever that we can pull in terms of our health. I mean, we are literally what we eat, right? So like
Mm.
our food and our movement, and our recovery and our base state of health are definitely something we want to look at. And that's one of the things that I feel like is a common mistake where people just jump into it, they get super excited, and then they kind of skip over some of that stuff and just like, what else can I add into the mix?
Yeah, like, people don't realize that they need to if they're serious about stacking, they need to treat the rest of their lifestyle choices as if it's also part of the stack.
I love that. That's a great angle, and it's a good way to think about it. Because even on stuff like a GLP, as powerful and as amazing as those compounds are, yeah, slowdown is going to happen. And so there's a time and a place, right, where we're looking at, well, can we get more movement in? Can we get some steady state walk? Can we get a little more walking? Can we get a fasted morning cardio? Could we get a hit session in once or twice a week? Are we able to get our resistance training in? And then when we're looking at our food, are we hitting the right even generally lightly a kind of a right range for our macronutrients, getting the right protein and getting high quality carbs and fat. So you're totally right. We got to look at those things as part of the stack.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I guess let's play a build a stack game, I guess, Like, I don't know how I guess I should have thought of a case study. Part of me
Well,
wants to
I
add. Yes.
yeah, let's take it if we're coming into this from a GLP.
Yes.
Because
Let's
that's a
do it.
great way to go. And then we can also look at it if we were coming in through another avenue, right? But like since most to your point, everybody's either coming into this through a GLP, usually semi-autos, and then they're also or they're coming into it from a BPC style
Right.
regenerative compound. So if you're coming in from a GLP, you know, primarily oftentimes you have a weight loss goal, right? And so then the way I look at stacks is I just look at these other groups of peptide compounds. So we have the GLPs and they're doing their thing. And then we have our you mentioned growth hormone secretagogues. So then we have our growth hormone influencing peptides. So I immediately start thinking about that's a category. Then we have our mitochondrial peptides that are there to repair, restore, enhance mitochondrial function. So I immediately start thinking about those. And then we have our repair, restore, regenerate compounds like our BPCs and GHKCUs. And so I think about those. And then there's that category of like niche peptides, right? Of other miscellaneous things that a person may want to address or that may kind of fall into one of these other categories like brain energy, clarity, nootropics, or some of these other types of things. But that's usually where I start. I think, okay, what's the
Mhm.
goal? If they're coming in
Mhm.
from a GLP, what do we want to look at adding next? And typically for me, I'm going to be looking at the mitochondrial side of things, and I'm going to be looking at the growth hormone side of things.
Same. Yeah. My people often come into lives of mine or even coaching sessions of mine saying, I'm on a GLP. What can I take to help me lose weight? And I'm tired all the time. And my first instinct is usually, well, what's your nutrition look like? Number one. Number two. And now let's take care of your mitochondria because I think that is the next logical move because long-term side effects of some of these GLPs is eating in a prolonged calorie deficit tends to take a hammer on the metabolism. So mitochondria is like a logical place to start for me.
I 100% agree. I don't think we don't grow up walking around thinking about our mitochondria that much, and it's like,
No.
I really at all. I mean, most people, your mitochondria, like, mito what? Like, yeah, it kind of flashbacks to like high school bio or something,
Yeah.
or it was like, or or like the common, like, yeah, the cellular, the factory of the cell or something. But when you think about it, like mitochondria, it's like the name of the game. I mean, mitochondria function powers everything. And so we can track back our mood, our energy, our cognition, our metabolism, our immune function. We can track it all back to like, how's our mitochondria doing? And
Mhm.
so if we're thinking about a big lift or a big bang for our buck or a way to deploy, a mitochondrial restore, that's where I do think peptides are pretty cool and kind of unique in that it gives us some really direct mechanisms that we can use to go after mitochondrial function, not just the basics of lifestyle and those foundations. Which moving forward, we're just going to assume you're doing that kind of stuff and you're going to address
Mhm.
that, and so we'll just be
Yep.
layering on then with the other cool stuff. But definitely, I go mito, and I don't know, how you tend to gravitate on this, but I do generally fall into the camp that says, SS31 might be a good place to start.
Always. Or I will tell them not see.
Motsy, phenomenal compound. And the other one that I sometimes will start a person on, which I'm a huge fan of, and some people don't love it, but I am a giant fan of it, is SLUPP332.
Are
And
you? Okay.
I love SL I love Sloop, to shorten it down, Sloop, because 1, it's an
Yep.
oral, and
Yep.
2, it has a nice synergy with a weight loss goal, and a
Mm.
nice kind of exercise mimetic effect and an increase in mitochondrial function, efficiency, as well as helps with, like, insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning and a number of other systems. I really like Sloop, and so that's the one that sometimes I'll be like, "Let's start on Sloop right away," because we're gonna get benefit from it right away.
Right. Right. And people like to get benefit relatively quickly from their peppers. Or we can say peptides. We're on a podcast,
Yeah,
but
yeah. But in case the shorts, we wanna maybe we you still use some code words in case you wanna make some clips.
exactly. Yeah. And also I'm CDJPepperz, so it kind of comes with the territory. And the people are the pepper fam. Yeah.
Totally.
I build my brand on calling it peppers, but
Exactly.
which is cute, but we talk about serious science here on Rolling with the Tides. But in seriousness, sometimes I like totally forgot about Sloop being a mitochondrial pep because it is. PK pathway, exercise mimetic, checks all the boxes.
It is, and it's like, technically it's kind of a, small compound category, and sometimes we kind of group these peptides and small, like, molecule type of compounds into the same category, which for all intents and purposes, I think it's okay to do. But like SLUPP332, is one that it has some controversy behind it because of the, again, limited human data, mouse trials versus human trials, how much is really effective or not. And uh, for me, I kind of got into and got educated on peptides in, that quest to solve a like debilitating, life-threatening autoimmune condition. And so, like, along the way, I also figured out, oh my God, you can use these to like lose weight and build muscle and improve cognition and all this other stuff. But ultimately, I was just trying to like not die, and not
Mm,
keep going to the hospital all the time. And so
mm,
I ended up working with a lot of different really cool people. And one of the guys that I worked with for a long time, who was a coach and mentor to me, was a guy named Alex Kiekel, who, in my opinion, is probably one of the smartest human beings alive and probably one of the preeminent, really one of the preeminent like coaches, teachers, searchers in the space. And I just learned so much with him. I worked with him for not quite a year, and he's the one who introduced me to Sloop, and I had like fantastic results with it as an oral compound, which there aren't as many oral compounds that are effective. I found it to
mm,
be highly effective. I love to get people on that as a starting spot. So that's a good one to kind of put back in the mix. And
mm.
another good one when we're looking at mitochondrial stuff is 5-amino 1-MQ. And
Love.
that can be ran orally as well, or sub-Q. And that also has a really nice synergy with our weight loss or fat loss or body composition goals.
Absolutely. 100%. Gotta love transferring nicotinamide and methyltransferase back into your own NAD.
Totally. I love that stacked. So as a mini stack, I love that. 5-amino 1-MQ with NAD. So if you're going to be running some NAD, I
Yeah.
love to run it with a MOTS or an SS31 and with a 5-amino 1-MQ. And like, call me crazy, but I have ran all of those mitochondrial peptides and I felt fantastic. Now, I will say when you're running mitochondrial stacks, one thing that you're going to look out for is that feeling of fatigue and that feeling of almost flu-like symptoms, and that's generally a sign that now you have kind of overspun, overstimulated the mitochondria. You're kicking out a lot of reactive oxygen species, those RSs, and they're now like doing damage, and that's actually working against you. So if you're ever running like a mitochondrial stack, right, that's one of the things I'll be looking out for is making sure that energy is going up, not going down.
Right, right. What is that indicative of for people who don't know when you start feeling the decrease in energy on a mitochondrial stack instead of an increase in energy? What is that?
Typically, it means we're doing too much. We've pushed our little workhorses past their capacity to function efficiently, right? And so now they're actually their performance is actually degrading. So that process of turning, turning whatever, if it's fat, if it's lipolysis, where those free fatty acids are getting turned into energy, it's now the mitochondria are overspun, they've been overstimulated, and so now they're actually producing compounds that we don't want them to produce. That's all of that's then starting our energy slide, right? And so that's one of those, like, if you're feeling flu-like symptoms or you're tired, um, and it's prolonged, right? Not a temporary thing, because you mentioned sometimes you might run like an SS31, and for the first week you might feel some fatigue, and then all of a sudden you get on the other side of that as the repair elements start kicking in and the mitochondrial cardiolipin improves and all that good stuff, you might start to feel better. But if you're running a bigger stack of mitochondrial peptides and that energy crashes, that means you're doing too much, and I would back off. I
Mm,
would pull some out of the stack and see what happens to the energy if it renormalizes, which generally it will.
yeah, great. All right. So now, when people are like, all right, what if I'm building a stack? Do I do all of them or do I just pick one?
Yeah, I mean, when you're starting off, the temptation is just to go absolutely, crazy and just order everything and just start all of these. It's like that stack sounds great. I'm gonna get the NAD, I'm gonna get the SS, I'm gonna get the MOT, I'm gonna get the 5, I'm gonna get the SLU. There's another one I'd even throw in there. There's a BAM15 that not a lot of people talk about.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a slightly different mitochondrial, agent, and then also there's methylene blue. Oh, I forgot about methylene blue. I mean, methylene blue is a phenomenal mitochondrial, like, agent, phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm gonna put all of those in the mix, and you can do it. I have done that, but I would say this, do not, like that it's like the equivalent of trying to, like, helicopter yourself into the top of the mountain. You really want to go on the journey to get to a spot where you are able to run a multitude of compounds that really then provide benefit to you that you're like, this is amazing. But if you just like helicopter in, you're not ready for the altitude, you don't have the right gear, you're just not prepared. So like take the journey, take the journey, ideally work with a coach or get a part of a community or a course or somebody who can offer some guidance. And I think in this case, I would say, let's pick one thing to get started with in addition to your core base that you're running.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I like to tell people start one pep at a time. So then when wait a few weeks and then factor in the next one, because then if you're getting adverse side effects for whatever reason, you know who the culprit is. And I think that
Totally.
is an important rule of stacking because again, it's hard to if you just go out the gate with 6 peptides and you have adverse effects, you don't know which one to take out.
No idea.
No clue. Yeah. Mhm.
No, and then that can be discouraging, and then a person like, "This didn't work for me," and then maybe they stop or they get, they get frustrated or and then they miss out on this longer term benefit that they could
Mhm.
have gotten if they would have slowed it down a little bit, so I'm like, just let's pump the brakes tiny little bit. Let's add one, and then to your point, let's assess even over a 2-week period or a 4-week period, and then we can start to like, what's the next one we want to bring in? So if I was looking at bringing in a mitochondrial peptide, the next one I probably would be looking at would either be like a regenerative compound or, to your earlier point, a growth hormone. So I don't know, which way you tend to go on that, but like when I'm looking at growth hormones, I sometimes feel like that's that's a little bit sometimes more advanced just because oftentimes that's now going to move a person to a daily injection.
Yeah, I love a good growth hormone, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're for everybody. I think in a perfect world, they should be for everybody. You know what I mean? Why is that? Did you see that? Or is that
I
just me?
did.
Okay, that was so weird. No, they're not for everybody. Because of the daily injection part, I'm a strong believer in no DAC for like a CJC IPA personally. I don't think that we need a week's long pituitary stimulation, which for those who don't know what a growth hormone secretagogue is, they stimulate the pituitary gland for the most part and release your body's own natural growth hormone. And in that, can reduce visceral fat, can build muscle, create cellular autophagy, cellular efficiency, modulate the immune system, promote healing, hair, skin, and nails. They do everything except clean the bathroom. Um, and
And some of them are really targeted and really cool. And then you have like kind of specialized versions like a tesamorelin, which can have some benefit on targeting visceral belly fat. You
Mhm,
have something that is very, hit or miss, but if it hits, it can be cool, like an AOD 9604. But I find that most people don't really respond to that actually that well. So they are very cool, right? And they have a lot of benefit. And then depending on what your goals are, they oftentimes will sink in because most people, especially if we're coming from a GLP-1, we have a weight loss or body composition goal, but we probably also want to sleep better. We want more
I was
recovery. We want less aches and pains and all that stuff. And a growth hormone compound can really be beneficial there, but it definitely is a step up in commitment to being on a five at least a 5 on 2 off or 7 days on is usually what I recommend.
agree. Because usually when I go reach for the growth hormone compounds, it's because someone has come to me for a coaching and they have like 2 or more things that a growth hormone would check off the list as opposed to 3 separate compounds, you know? So, if they're having trouble sleeping, if they want, the better hair, skin, and nails, if they're looking to preserve muscle on their GLP, I'm like, "Well, guess what? I got something for you. It's gonna do all those things."
Totally.
Here's the trade-off, So because to me, I think it's the perfect answer to not having like 6 things in your stack, It's a Swiss Army knife. It
Yeah,
does
absolutely. Huge benefit. And for most people, their growth hormone levels, just start to decline as part of a natural part of
age.
aging.
Right.
So as we, hit 30 and, as we all know, everything just starts to but like even with healthy lifestyle, and decently healthy lifestyle or what we would consider to be like a semi-okay lifestyle and some activity, your growth hormone levels can be can be pretty low, just like hormonal levels oftentimes are going to be out of balance even if you're healthy. And so it really can be a beneficial compound. And I 100% agree with you. I've really liked a good filter. If it's going to hit 2 or more of these things, we should definitely consider it. And there is a compound out there that some people have heard of called MK677.
I was
It's an
gonna say that.
Oh yes, okay. So it's an oral. It's an oral version again, small molecule. It can it can be awesome, but it can also produce a lot of, side effects for people, especially around hunger,
Well,
because it
'cause
activates and
ghrelin.
stimulates the ghrelin pathway, yeah,
Yeah.
and some other stuff too. So, it tends to be a little bit more niche. However, there is a new version called MK777
Mm,
which I have been hearing through the grapevine is quite fantastic and eliminates the hunger stimulation, so more targeted, less binding to the ghrelin, so less receptor
mhm.
sensitivity, so it doesn't trigger that pathway as much. Comes with very low water retention, I guess, as well, which is another major concern for growth hormone type of compounds, especially for the ladies. They don't want that water weight or that bloated feeling or that puffiness that can sometimes come with those compounds. So I'm looking to either cycle it into my own stack or more likely, work with somebody who's actively using it to kind of get feedback and track results. But MK777 holds some promise for an oral growth hormone compound.
That is promising. When I think of MK677, it's when like Johnny 6'2" at 158 says he wants to put on some
Yeah,
muscle. And I'm
totally.
like, boy, do you know there is an oral supplement you can take that will help you eat more and then help you with your pumps in the gym? Okay. Do I know one for you?
Absolutely.
So part of it, the beauty of MK677 is, I think, for people who need that to eat more, I recommend someone to research it if been on a GLP for 2 years, that to me, that doesn't necessarily make sense. But the new one that you're talking about, that's a whole new conversation because a daily oral supplement versus a daily injection can be way easier to pardon the analogy, but to swallow for someone.
Way easier.
Then yeah, you know what I mean?
And
Uh,
even if you don't mind doing your, injections, it's just like at some point you can feel like a pincushion. Like for me personally, I don't do any nighttime injections anymore. I just have got to
mm,
a spot where I just got sick of it. I just got sick of doing AM and PM. So I reorganized and consolidated it kind of in my current routine that I'm running. I just eliminated everything that I have to pin at night. So I'm just like a pure
mhm,
AM. And then I have my, my oral supplement, like my oral compounds that I'm taking AM and PM. But it can long term, you can kind of get to be a little bit annoying to have lots of different compounds you're pinning. So I think you're right to say if you're going to go with a growth hormone, make sure you're going to fall into that camp who's going to get benefit from it and be ready to commit to it for that kind of a schedule. And it
mhm.
is one of those things where, really, it's one of those things that people talk about cycling.
I was just
And of
gonna
cour's
say that next
yeah,
too. We're
yeah,
so
yeah.
in
I was
sync.
like, love to hear the thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, GH for most of them, you are gonna cycle it. That's not a forever pin like a GLP might be. And I say might be because some people might not be on their GLPs forever, but for some people who can be, who will be doing like a maintenance program. But yeah, I've found that it's recommended for lighter GH secretagogues, like a 3-month cycle is pretty sufficient. But with tesamorelin, I usually think that like a 6-month cycle is more appropriate because that one you might just start losing the water retention at 3 months and then you're stopping. Like it doesn't make much sense. And in the clinical trials, they researched it there for 12 months at a much higher dose than I would tell people
Mhm.
to research themselves. So I think that, um, yeah, so 3 to 6 months is the window I would say for GH, and then you take a break.
Yeah, take a little break, and there's, the different types of secretagogues as well. So, you could always move from one to another, switch it up a little bit. I mean, there's definitely wisdom in some cycling and giving your body, a break from whatever the particular compound is. I think some things really obviously benefit from cycling more than others. So that is a consideration in your stack is knowing, is it kind of a recommended break that you should take? Like, hey, it's a good idea to take the break, or is it like, hey, this really isn't doing that much anymore now, and you kind of need to take a break.
Mm,
And I think that one way you can go there is you can cycle through some of the different growth hormone compounds that are activating some of the different pathways. So there is some flexibility there. And I also like your idea of, moving to a gentler one maybe over time, or like I think ipamorelin, is just so well tolerated by everybody.
and it's a
Even more
different
so than
pathway.
yeah, in a different pathway, even more, and you mentioned the DAC. So like, DAC is this like that drug affinity compound, right? That like extends the function of that CJC. And I found that CJC is kind of a little bit of a temperamental compound. Like I've had a lot of folk who have reactions to it. I personally had a reaction to it. It created like some weird like tingling over time. I had some bizarre stuff, and that was the compound that I had cycled in. And so,
Mhm,
so I don't always go directly to the CJC.
mhm.
EPA combo. Sometimes I just like EPA if we're looking for a nice, easy, solid, effective growth hormone compound that's very well tolerated, especially, for people who don't want that water bloat. I'm like, that's a good compound.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice rhythmic pulses,
Mhm.
GHRP as opposed to GHRH. Yeah. It's nice. It can get the job done.
Totally, totally. And my other thought on that too is just like AM versus PM or both. I would say, well, if you're only going to pick one, align to where you're going to have the biggest bang for your buck. So, for instance, when I was like in the giant cut phase and looking to get lean, I would run it in the AM fasted,
Mhm.
pre cardio, right? Pre like my steady state 30-minute incline walk that I like religiously did for like a year. That's where I got a lot of benefit from it. But you can also run it, dual AM and PM. And PM, of course, you're going to get more of that sleep benefit, the more of the rest, repair, rejuvenate. So very flexible compounds. Highly recommend. That's probably where I would go after mitos. And then I'd also probably be thinking about these like restore, repair, regenerate compounds. That's probably the other group that I'd start thinking about, like right out, or some point in that stack building, do we need or want to have something like a BPC or a BPC TB blend or just a TB or the GHKCU or the keep whatever, all of the different ones that are out there. That's the other thing I start thinking about is, do we need one of those compounds in play to help with the aches and pains, the maintenance,
Mhm.
like repair if we have chronic injury or issues?
Mhm. Can't forget KPV. One of my
Love
faves.
KPP. Totally.
Love KPV.
I would throw out, thymosin alpha one. I'd put in that same. I mean, from like that, like again, if they're having, if it's more of an immune kind of compromised, low energy immune system type thing, we might be looking at, okay, out of these compounds that are going to be driving that regenerative kind of repair mechanisms, what makes the most sense? And a lot of times, that's where the GHKCU blends and the GHKCU come in because people are like, well, I really, that skin, the hair, I like that sounds great to me. And that compound's awesome because it does more than just skin, right? And skin
She's
and
so
hair.
much more than a beauty compound. She's so much more than a beauty
Yeah.
compound. I said this, I think I don't know if I said this on another episode, but I said this on a live once where it's like, she's like the pretty girl in high school that lo and behold turns out to be the valedictorian and nobody knew. Nobody knew.
Totally.
This whole
Yeah.
time they thought she was just the pretty girl,
Yes. Yes.
but,
Such a versatile compound, that also comes with its own, price to tap into its multitude of benefits, which can be Site
yes.
reactions site reactions and soreness. I mean, it's out of all the compounds, I think probably in my experience, the most reactive, for people where we're gonna see some kind of a histamine reaction or,
Mhm.
mast cell activation that could look like soreness, swelling, bruising. So that's one where I think, looking at the bag of tricks, if you're gonna deploy that in your research, there are definitely some things you wanna look at to make that process a
Mhm.
little bit less painful.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's the list of, leaving it out for half an hour so it gets to room temperature, pinning slowly, taking a zinc supplement, adding more bacteriostatic water, and so on. Jumping around on one foot, doing it under
Totally.
a full moon. No, kidding. Those two are not real. Those
I mean,
the
they
new
might be. I had my own bizarre superstitious kind of experience with that, but I would share it with people and be like, there is zero science to what I'm gonna say to you, absolutely zero. So just my experience has been when I inject that colored, the purple, I have a number of tattoos. When I inject it into my purple area of my tattoo, it just seems to go in much easier there. And that's like color affinity. I don't know. I can't, there's no backing to it, but for whatever reason, it just goes in easier into my tattoo where the color matches. So take it for what you will.
okay,
Probably placebo, but that's the way it goes for me.
there
No
you go.
science there. But there are some things that's where, when we look at some of the blends, like a Clo or Glow blend, which
Mhm,
I, I'm not a giant fan of those blends
mhm,
all the way. I mean, they're fine. It's just, the dosing, the blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of controversy on those, but
mhm.
just the main thing on that is if I really people make their own blends. Like, because if you pull your GHKCU in, then if you want to pull some BPC in or some KPV on top of that, again, over dilute, pull a little extra backwater in, that a lot of times will dramatically reduce site reactions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, That's one of the reasons I love Clo. It's never once been a stinging
Perfect. It's kind of built
sensation.
in with that of reduction,
Yeah,
right? It's built
yeah,
in with those other compounds that help drive that site
yeah.
reaction down.
Like, I'm okay with the microdose of the 3 other compounds for
Totally.
me, you know what I mean? And
And
that's how
that's
I
how I think you should approach it. Is that how you kind of set up dosing for it?
yeah, yeah. So
Me too. 100% agree. And so that's where I think there's confusion. I have a great relationship with Dustin, who's the owner, chief science officer at Vanguard Labs, and they've done extensive testing on blends and degradation and chemical composition, and there is absolutely no truth to the myth and the rumor or the belief or the assertion that those things does like chemically work against each other and degrade and break down over time. In his opinion, as a full-time chemist and tester, like that's just not what the data shows it.
no, it's not. And, I don't know why people get off on saying that or, like, saying that, like, GHK and the pH doesn't work well, or then they're saying, "Oh, the half-lives of the TB and the BPC," and it's like, I mean, it if you go into it knowing you're getting a pretty good dose of GHK and a micro dose of the other 3, knowing that they do work synergistically together, you're fine. You're fine. You
Totally fine.
won't be disappointed, you
Nope.
know? Mhm.
Nope, not at
Absolutely.
all. No, I think that's it. And then, so I mean, if we stopped right there, you'd say, "Whoa, man, that's like, that is a lot of options." And there are a lot of options. So within each of these categories, we have these different compounds. And as you're looking at then which one of these might I want to pull into my stack, again, that's can be beneficial to have somebody who's kind of worked with different people just to help you kind of identify what your primary goals are, because it can get overwhelming, and there can be a little bit of that. I'm just going to throw everything at this and see what happens, which I generally don't recommend doing.
Yeah, because there's what I like to call FOMO stacking, where you go on a live, you hear someone talk about how much they love a compound, and now you have the FOMO, the fear of missing out, for those of you who don't know the expression. You have the FOMO of, "Well, that sounds really great, I want that," and now you wanna add it to your stack. But, you know, FOMO stacking and goal stacking are 2 very different things. And then there's, like, FOMO stacking, there's goal-based stacking, and then there's what I like to call kitchen sink stacking, like people who think they're professional lab rats and wanna try every single peptide for the sake of saying that they have, which is similar to FOMO stacking, but less novelty, more like a mission.
It's true. And I think, there's a place for that, especially, for folks who have found, maybe this is what partly they do now is
Mhm.
either, research and educate or research and coach. And they're definitely, from a coaching standpoint and from a, education standpoint, I do like to fall inside categories of compounds that I've personally either worked with directly or had the opportunity to like use, or have worked with enough people on so that I have confidence that I could say this would be the right compound for the right time. So I get that because I definitely went through that phase, and I mean that's partly what drove me to get into the business of peptides and understanding how that works and working with different peptide manufacturers and working with U.S. resellers and understanding like, okay, how do you get super high quality, product and where you're getting from, matters, and having trusted partners and sourcing, all that stuff is absolutely essential. And so that's the other part of the stack that I would say is quality, purity, and then the safety of the compounds, of course, endotoxin, heavy metal, which are actually much more rare than people might understand.
Mhm.
Not to say they don't exist. They do. It does exist, but it's a little bit of less of a concern in my mind than say sterility, and then purity and the quantity. So misdiagnosed or mislabeled product in my mind is even a bigger risk than say a heavy metal or certainly endotoxin. But that's why sourcing matters, right? And that's why I know you work with some trusted vendors. I work with trusted vendors and brands that I really believe in, and companies that I really believe in. like
Mhm.
lab sourced plug. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are, but yeah, that's like the other side of the stack is like you need to work like as you're looking at these elements, it's like you want to make sure your information is good and trustworthy, and knowledgeable, and you want to make sure your vendor that your product that you're using for your research really passes those same kind of criteria.
Yeah. That's why I always tell people testing, 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 and COAs. Make sure you look at the COAs and educate yourself to know what you're looking at when you're looking at the COAs. Just producing a COA is not enough. It's what does the COA actually say? What are the results? You know, you could run it through GPT to learn what it means the first few times and get to know what you're looking at so that you can be an educated consumer.
Totally. It's kind of like reading a food label. It's like
Yes.
starting to understand how what you're looking at and what it all means. And that's why I do love like brands and companies like LabSource that are highly committed to getting basically all the testing done that you could get testing. And that's why I also love Vanguard Labs because, well, one, I've been there many times. I go almost every month down there and hang out with Dustin and his wife Tori. It's like and what I love about those guys too is that they're ISO certified, which base and they don't just do peptide. They didn't get started in this game as peptides. Like there's been an explosion of testing facilities that are now offering full panel testing on peptides that just did not exist 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago.
Mhm.
Are they less trustworthy? Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing a good job. I'm not saying any particular one, but like Vanguard is monitored in like the government comes in, they have to keep logs. People check, independent people come in and validate and verify their machines are accurate and doing what they're saying. They're keeping, and that, like, there are times and places where I do think government regulation is good, and that's definitely one, okay? Because the other places that are not, they don't have to do that. They literally, there's no one checking the results. So,
Right. You don't want something that's been tested in their mom's basement. No. Like you
and
want
you can
no.
get this equipment and you can test things. I mean, and people are and do. I mean, the peptide industry is exploding, and people see opportunity. And again, I'm not saying that any of them are unethical or aren't doing a good job, but I'm just also saying that like everything, where the tests are coming from, that also matters.
Mhm. Mhm. And that they're all coming from or mostly coming from the same place is another tell as well.
I
Um,
do,
uh,
yep. I like to see that too. When I see people bouncing all over the place, it just makes me think they got a result maybe that they didn't like or two, or that they're deal shopping, or that that again, there's like I want to see consistency. I want to see consistency in those COAs. And that's not to say that some variations not is not acceptable. It is because there's some compounds that certain labs don't really test or won't test or aren't like as good. Like L-carnitine is just one that comes to my mind. I know there's some labs like their testing process on that is they don't test it, and so there are times where it's fine to have a slight variation. But I'm with you. If I see always changing COAs, I'm like, what's going on with all these always changing COAs?
mhm. Mhm. Yeah, there's a story there. There's definitely a
Sometimes the story could just be the lab was super busy and it was going to take me 3 months to get my test back. And people are like, what's their peptides? So I was like, hey, over here, lab, can you please test this for me and get me these results back in like 2 weeks and not 3 months?
right, right, that's fair, but when you see just like a potpourri of all different ones, I start to think it's a little sus, but that's just my opinion.
I agree. I agree. So, I mean, I think that, if you're my big takeaway, if you're kind of going through this and you're like thinking about, wow, okay, is my head spinning more or less after this? I think it
Mhm.
just comes down to again, what's your goals? What are you on right now? What is like to your point, what is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck as that next ad? And most likely it's going to be something in the mitochondrial stack.
Quick break to shout out the sponsor of today's episode, LabSourced. If you've ever gone hunting online for peptide research compounds, you know it can feel like the Wild West. Half the sites look shady and you have no idea what's actually in those vials. That's why I use LabSource when I'm doing my own research. They're US based, and every batch goes through more than 7 different tests before it ever ships out. So you're not guessing on quality. Every vial has a batch number and a QR code, so you can pull up the testing data for what's in your hand straight from LabSource third party verified reports. Their shipping is fast and the pricing is fantastic. So you're not waiting weeks or overpaying just to get started. If you want to support the show and level up your research, go to labsource.com and use the code PEPPERFAM at checkout for 15% off your order. That's labsource.com, code PEPPERFAM for 15% off. All products are for laboratory research use only and not for human or animal consumption. And now, back to the show. So I just thought of something so
Yes,
random that we didn't talk about, um, but we didn't mention aminos at all.
we did it.
Is that a disservice? I don't know.
It's there's so many compounds sometimes, like,
No, I know.
can you
Right?
get all of them?
Can you fit them all in? I don't know if you can fit them all in, but aminos are, I mean, they're not technically peptides. They could be factored into the miscellaneous, I think.
Absolutely. For
Yeah.
sure, and I would throw stuff like L-carnitine I would throw into that mix as well. I mean, there's some really great stuff out there that are, like, depending on your goals, um, we for sure should be talking about. I mean, there's so many different ones, things like dihexa, and I'm running a compound right now that I am just, like, absolutely there's, like yeah, so there's so many, and so, like, the danger is that we're gonna have a 6-hour long episode, and we're
Yeah.
still not gonna cover everything we need to cover.
Well, just shout out there to aminos like L-carnitine because L-carnitine is wonderful.
It really
Um,
is.
it's yeah, gotta love a good shuttle peptide.
Yeah, I like L-carnitine, if you're running, body composition, weight loss goals, L-carnitine is a really good one to put in the mix. Yeah, pre-fasted cardio or with your cardio or with your workouts, along with that 5 amino, super awesome synergy there.
Yeah, yeah. Synergy, I think, is the takeaway from this episode, honestly, because it's about the compounds' mechanisms of action and finding ones that complement each other. So, like on, for example, a retatrutide, where your glucagon receptor being activated burns the fat, L-carnitine takes the free-form fatty acids, shuttles it across the mitochondrial membrane where it can effectively be burned as fuel. So you're getting ATP energy and you're getting rid of fat cells. So it's like, what better
Bam, bam,
marrying?
bam. Yeah,
Right. I mean, that's like Lucy and Ricky or something, you know? I
it's
mean, they
like
were
the
divorced.
perfect combo. It is a super good combo, and I'm like, yeah, if lipolysis, if your goal is fat loss, body composition changes, that's just a phenomenal stack.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the stack, the two. That's all you need, you know? And I mean, arguably, you don't even really need the L-carnitine because Retta does enough on its own, but if
True.
you wanted to, it does a lot. It's
It is
not.
I feel like it's a little like, utilized a little bit. And, like, another one that's underutilized, and I sometimes forget to talk about it because it's, like, so I just think it's so fundamental, but that's glutathione. I mean, glutathione is another one that it's like, how do we not just talk all we could have talked all show long about glutathione. I mean, because it is like the
I
master
know.
antioxidant, phenomenal compound.
Master antioxidant. Gotta get those reactive oxygen species out of there. I love we talked about glutathione a couple of episodes ago with Bailey because we were talking about how its immune modulating effects, but it does so much, detoxifies the liver, brightens the skin, fades dark spots for people who are dealing with like hyperpigmentation or melasma. It it's just wonderful. I forget which doctor said it, but they were like, if we were truly treating patients and not outcomes in this country, after every surgery, there would be a bag of glutathione hanging in every hospital room, but there isn't.
Totally. I love it. I mean, I have a topical glutathione, like, basically night serum that I use from a brand called Oro Wellness,
Mm,
which I would totally give you my code, but it doesn't work anymore right now, so I have to get on those guys 'cause, I love Dr. Nyan. they've developed a really unique mechanism. It uses polysaccharide channels, so essentially sugar, to pull it through
Mhm.
the skin, and in their clinicals achieves ability and cellular activity similar to a IV or a sub-Q injection. And they have a glutathione product that's a facial product, but they also have a spray. You spray it
Mhm.
on and you just like you rub it in with your things and it absorbs in and it's like a daily thing. That's a really awesome way to get glutathione, like 1,000% superior to say an oral glutathione, which I generally don't recommend. It's either like sub Q, IV push, or this topical option is really phenomenal. And they also have a GHKCU copper peptide serum
Mm.
that is a sleeper. That is amazing. And
Mm.
that can, yeah, so that's another really great way to get that the GHKCU, because again, it's systemic. However, it is targeted. You're doing a targeted application on the face, and you can scalp too. But that serum is absolutely incredible
I love topical GHK. I swear by it.
too. And then that right there is a good place to start the stack building process in your research.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have your miscellaneous where you've got your nootropics and your bioregulators and your immune modulators, and yeah. So, and that's those are just like sprinkling a little bit of seasoning on the top of the stack.
I would agree. I look at those a lot of times as, yeah, this salt and pepper is a great analogy for those. Um, eh, and there are some cool compounds there. There really are in that
Yeah.
miscellaneous category. Unless like you're coming again, like you have kind of a specific area that you're trying to solve. Like, so maybe, you're dealing with a cognitive decline situation or kind of early onset dementia or, precursor to Alzheimer's or some other like neurological condition. Again, that's where we go back to our goals. We're going to say, well, we're going to like fast track some of these other compounds. Then we're going to want to like explore and research those way earlier than maybe we'd get to those because of your specific condition. Or if you're coming to the table, within like sexual dysfunction or something like a PT-141 or desire, that could be really big, right? Or like you're coming to the table and you're like, I really want to get tan, which is a big goal for some people. Then we're going to be looking at those MT1, MT2, melanotan 1 and melanotan 2. So sometimes those missed peptides can get fast tracked to get into a stack, again depending on the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. So goals are gold here in Stackland. A goal based stack is a good stack. And then I think one more question, and then we'll bounce into story time is this is one that I get a lot. How many peptides are too many peptides to stack?
Well, I think this comes again down to the individual and your situation overall, your overall biology. We're all a little bit of that unique snowflake going on. So are you a hyper responder or are you a very like kind of a lower responder where you can handle more compounds? Generally speaking, I can handle more of everything that I take than, let's just say, the person next to me. Meaning, I can get more benefit out of not necessarily like taking higher doses, but I can just get more benefit without side effects. So, I like didn't always know this about myself until I got into this space, but it was like, oh wow, I can take a lot of peptides that all like give me like all the upsides and none of the downsides. Like my body can handle it. CMAX is a great example. I run CMAX or Atomax and experience all upside. One of my colleagues runs the smallest amount, smallest 150 micrograms, and bam, instant anxiety. Anxiety just kicks right in, right? So it's like she's a hyper responder and she also responds and gets like the thing you don't really want it to do. So when it comes to stack sizing, we have to be aware of your unique biochemistry and then again your goals, and staying compliant and kind of I think building up a body of knowledge about yourself because n equals one, you need to become the expert on you, and that can inform then what you want to keep. And I'd say over time the goal should be simplifying and synergizing. And so ideally we're running what we need and no more. I mean, just from a budget standpoint, that's great. And that there's some things that we're periodically bringing in and then bringing out. And so that's kind of how I look at it these days.
Like a bioregulator, like Epitalin. You run it for 10 days, twice a year, you're done. You know, I love
Totally.
Epitalin for that reason. And you get so much out of it. You get so much out of it in those 10 days and even after the fact. Um,
And bioregulators are a great one to be looking at from a cycling in a periodic. And you might say, I have a number of different areas or systems that I know either from a you know, from a family history standpoint, or just from maybe DNA testing or whatever. It's like I need more heart support, or I need more kidney support, or I need more liver support. Well, that's cool because that's where these bioregulators can be awesome compounds that you can cycle in periodically. In addition to longevity protocols like a which is so awesome. Pinolon, which is another great, that's another great one I love for like neural support. These are good compounds to cycle in. So it's like, what's your current goal stack right now that you're running for like a 8-12 week period? Then what are these additional periodic stacks you can bring in? And then, what are some of those occasional one-off compounds that you're looking to bring in for a very specific reason for a limited time?
Mhm. So, in summation, there's no set number, but I like to advise that if you can tell me everything in your stack, what it does, and why you're choosing to research it, then you're fine. But if there is a pause for either of those two questions, maybe pump the brakes.
Mhm. I love it. I think that's wise. I think that's a wise filter. If you're not sure why you're running it, maybe you shouldn't be running it.
Mhm. Yeah. If you don't know why, most importantly, if you don't know why, and if you can't give me a very basic explanation of what it's supposed to do, you shouldn't be touching it, you know?
I think that's a smart. I think that's a smart filter for all of us.
Right, right. And of course, this is not medical advice, and you should always consult your doctor before making any medical decisions. We're just here talking about what it's like to research multiple compounds. So,
Yeah, this is all education, entertainment, hypothetical.
entertainment, hypothetically. And so now we pivot into story time. And story time is the tagline of story time is story time perspective, not prescription. Bump, bump. We're not Law and Order. I don't know why I did a bump bump, but so story time is how peptides either affected your life or came into your life, and what you were feeling and where you were at that time. So you said something earlier about struggling with coming into peptides because you were struggling with autoimmune issues. So do you want to start there, or do you have something else in mind?
No, well, I mean, background, I had been, I've been interested in health and wellness, fitness my whole life, and have worked in different ways, in different capacities in kind of health and wellness and fitness. Um, and so, the whole thing has always been a big part of what I want to do and how I want to be and what I'm interested in. But it really wasn't until 2020 where the COVID and the COVID vaccine, some interaction between those two. I'm not saying 100% that the vaccine gave me this, but I will say I don't think COVID by itself didn't give it to me. But between those two things, I spontaneously developed immune thrombocytopenia, ITP, and the absolute like worst presentation of it that you can imagine. And what is ITP? ITP is an autoimmune condition where your body starts to actively destroy your platelets. And in my case, it likes to destroy literally every single platelet in my body. So on multiple occasions, after I was diagnosed with this, essentially every 8 weeks or so, I would wake up and I have these like little red dots all over my body or blood blisters in my mouth. The red dots are called petechia. I'd never ever heard of, like, I go to the hospital, nobody even knew what the hell they were. People are like, I've never seen petechia before. And anyways, I tried all the conventional stuff. So for 2 years, I tried all the conventional stuff. They did crazy drugs, rituximab, and reset and rebooted my immune system. And the whole thing went into remission for a bit, and it came back. And uh, it was super devastating when it came back because I thought it was gone. And I was like free and I was treated, I was healed. And essentially my doctor, the blood doctor, basically, you're gonna be on, like, without insurance is like $8,000 a month. It's like it was gonna be like $2,500 a month for like this. It all worked out, so anybody's out there who's on some crazy medication or who been given that lifetime diagnosis, you just know how depressing that can be and how heavy that is to think you have to be dependent now on this thing. And so that really kicked me into overdrive to figure out like there has to be a way to there had to be something I could do, and there had to be somebody who knew something about this. That led me on a journey, and that took me deep into hormonal optimization. That took me deep into all kinds of, biohacking alternative therapies, red light, and those types of things. I've worked with a naturopath for a long time, one of my business partners. So like that brought me into all the regenerative medicine, stem cells, and exosomes, and then that brought me into peptides. And so I studied with and started following, William Hunter Williams and Jay Campbell. Got involved in all their stuff and did a bunch of stuff with them, and then I found Alex Keekle, and I did like a deep dive mentorship with his program and coaching program. And then, yeah, just kind of that spun the whole thing up. And then I started working with peptide resellers because I recognized there was an opportunity for me to bring my background in marketing and business development into the reseller space. And that has been wild and wonderful. And that's like a big part of what I do now is actually work on that side with resellers. And so all of that just led me on this crazy journey where along the way, I have seen significant improvement in my autoimmune condition. It's still there, but it's completely manageable at a lower dose than I had to be on before. And so kind of happy part there. But I mean, along the way, I'm in the best absolute shape of my life. I have the most energy, the most drive, the most clarity, the most passion that I ever had. I'm 50. I feel like, it's just like the whole world feels open and accessible. And it's like, this is my time now. And peptides are a big part of that, right? So that's why, for me, my mission is around education and empowerment, because these compounds are life changing. And I feel like everyone should have access to them at an affordable manner. That's why I really dislike the trend and the tendency towards trying to put all of these compounds into a compounding pharmacy list or putting them on a category one versus a category two. Like I just think the whole thing is, in my opinion, unfortunate. We'll see how it all plays out. That being said, there is value in having medical oversight and having people who are educated provide safe access, but that's where I'm like, with the right testing, yeah, and working with the right company like lab sourced, you can, you're dealing with the compound, its purity, it's not a dangerous compound, right? Maybe the danger is the lack of knowledge around it, but that's my story. That's how I kind of got into it, how I got passionate about it, how it personally transformed my life, and allowed me to achieve goals that I had wanted to achieve forever. I had never achieved sub 10% body fat. I had never had like a physique that I felt like, was the physique I dreamed about having as a kid, and it's like, oh shit, now I'm 50 and I finally got it, like showed up eventually. And that wasn't, just the compounds. That was a lot of hard work, and obsession and doing all the stuff you need to do in order to have the results you want to have. But peptides can be an incredibly powerful way to achieve your health goals, whether those are, from a body composition or aesthetic. But for most of us, it's a combination of all those things, right? We want to feel amazing. We want to feel like ourselves. We want to feel passionate and vital. And peptides can be part of that journey and should be part of that journey. And so I'm all about, access and safety and education so that people can get those things, make smart decisions, and achieve their goals.
That's great. Um, so I think this question you kind of teed up perfectly for it. It was like, well, what inspired you to start making content on peptides? Because it is a very niche market, so to speak.
The number of times I had started and stopped making content, I love speaking. I love communication. I worked in professional development, like a mini Tony Robbins kind of for like organizations where I, do stage talks and all that kind of good stuff and small group training. And so it's something that I love to do. And I have tried to make content on different stuff. I just never really stuck. And it when I started making content on peptides on TikTok, it was life like life changing for me because I was like, whoa, like this is my platform. Like the engagement was there. Um and and I had done all the I was looking at other content as other and just transparently. I was like, I have a moral obligation to make the content because people are making content and they just don't and I'm not point anybody out here, but they just don't really know what the hell they don't know what they're talking about. I've had the opportunity to work and be mentored by some of the absolute smartest people in this space, and I was like, I felt like I had to share, and I wanted to share, and it was fun, and I wanted to be part of that conversation, and so that's what started to really inspire me to make the content and put myself out there and be a resource for people because ultimately I want to see them achieve their goals, and I feel like I have to help.
So you were talking about how peptides has made your immune condition and your life more bearable, more livable, and even better than that. What do you think are the all-star compounds that stand out for you in helping you achieve that vitality?
I mean, I think the GL I think a retatrutide, like a Retta, Rizzy, Terzi, whatever, your GLP category are just phenomenal compounds. And I started on Tirzepatide was my first introduction. And, I mean, now I look at Tirzepatide and I'm like, man, that is like a blunt force. Like, I mean, that is like a sledgehammer. Like, so I do think it has its place, and I think it's an incredibly powerful compound. But man, I just love Retatrutide. Like, I'm like Retta for life. Like that shirt's going to come to my store soon. Like Retta, king of the GLPs, because it's just so phenomenal. And there'll be a better compound at some point or something that evolves, but it's just great because for me, achieving a body composition goal, I have achieved body composition goals. I mean, I was a macro coach. Like I was like hardcore in CrossFit. I've been a personal trainer, I have certifications. Like I understand how to get jacked. I understand how to lose weight, all of those things. And yet I can tell you during the pandemic, because it was so crazy and totally disrupted everybody's schedule, I gained and lost 25 pounds every year. So it looks like 100 pounds. I gained and lost over 4 years. Every year I'd gain 25 pounds, I'd lose 25 pounds. Gain 25 pounds, lose 25 pounds. Literally every year. Never happened before, but during the pandemic, it would happen every year. And that was another thing that I was really sick of. I was like, I have to get off. This is driving me absolutely insane. And what's so cool about having one of these compounds that then you can kind of move to maintenance on and keep like in your stack forever is is that you can maintain what you achieve. Like I cannot tell you like how for me that's liberation because it's not the hardest part is not losing the weight. The hardest part is maintaining that weight loss longer than 12 months because statistically before a GLP, you were a one percenter if you maintained that weight loss for more than 18 months. Oh, like and it would just fall off the cliff after that. If you maintain weight loss over like for 3 years, you're like at a 0.00000001% of all humanity. So like now we have these compounds where you can achieve a goal and you can have it for the rest of your life. Are you kidding me? Like, yes, sign me up for that. Love it. Giant fan of Retta. And then I would say from there, like I'm a big fan of like somatropin. So I run HGH, and so like I don't mess around with the like growth hormones. I just go right to like the main line, and that has also been a really great compound in a super low dose, very beneficial as you get into your 40s and 50s. And then my fun favorite like just kind of I don't know entertaining compound is probably MT2. Like I've become a huge fan of MT2. I love it. It's such a great compound. I've never been tan before my whole life. Never been tan. Super white. Now, I literally was at the coffee shop this morning, and the coffee shop was like, "Man, you look so tan." She was like, "The sun just loves you," and I was like, "The sun has hated me my entire life until I found melanotan. Now I can go out in the sun and not be afraid. But before that, I was afraid, very afraid. So like, and I mean, there's so many great. I mean, I love SLU PP332. I love MOTS-C. 5-amino. I have a lot of like all-star compounds that I would say these are some of my favorites. The sleeper for me right now, BAM 15. Nobody runs BAM 15. Nobody knows about anything about it. BAM 15, like, is another one where I'm like, I love you, BAM 15. I run it at night. I take it every night. Doesn't matter what you eat during the day. Doesn't matter. None of it matters whether you exercise or not. You take BAM 15, and it essentially counteracts basically anything. Again, when you're running your GLP, you're doing your stuff, but you're on maintenance. So it can be a really powerful tool for maintenance, but it can also be a really powerful tool just along the way if you have body composition goals. BAM 15.
Mm, okay.
Mitochondrial uncoupler. So that one makes your mitochondria less efficient, so they burn more energy while you do nothing. And it will increase body temperature. You will sweat, but unlike the DNPs of earlier area, you're not gonna like self combust. So It's
Yeah.
pretty safe.
Right. Nice. Awesome. Did you want to talk about how you got into the peptide industry at all? Like, because I know you said you got into it, but like, is there a story there that you want to
There's a
tell?
story. There's a story. I'm gonna be a little like intentionally vague. I do want to respect and represent various. I work with a number of different organizations and companies and do a lot of consulting. And so sometimes I'm operating under an NDA and sometimes I'm not, and I can speak really freely about stuff. But I got involved in the peptide space because I was looking for like peptides, and it was like looking for companies that made peptides, and then I was like, I just noticed these companies aren't a lot of them aren't doing some of the basic stuff that I would look at from an e-com standpoint and from a just like from an education standpoint and using things like email to keep people aware of like what's going on and what new products they have and creating blogs to educate and various other things. And then come to find out, I learned a lot about what a resale, research use only company can and can't do. But yeah, so I ended up partnering up with a relatively small company at that time, and over about a year and a half of working with them quite closely, they grew tremendously. In part because of the work that I did and the timing of like peptide kind of stuff. But it was awesome. I kind of saw like a company go like from starting to like one of the leaders in the space and just that whole journey was so educational. And so that's where, I really learned the ins and outs of what actually happens behind the scenes at peptide companies and sourcing and manufacturing partners and like what to look for in how things are produced and where they're coming from. And what does US made really mean versus what does it not mean? And so I mean, still like along the way, like I just I know where all like, I want to know where all the skeletons are buried. I know the stuff. I know the truths, the halves truths, the untruths, the marketing spins, like how it all really works. And that's been awesome and like eye-opening. So to like help people understand like how the real whole process works, how peptides are produced, where they're produced, what to look for in those manufacturing partners, how they come into the US. And I, actively help manage that process for people as well. And so I'm like pretty involved on the import export side of things. I found like that's almost like a second thing I've got going on now is, just helping facilitate safe transport of peptides and quality stuff like for resellers and for suppliers. So it's a really cool, crazy space. And my hope is that we continue to have access to it because certainly there are trends and indications that we might it might become harder and harder and more difficult to find quality supply at affordable prices. There's been a lot of issues just in China recently and also in the US, and changes that are coming, so we'll see how it all shakes out.
So I think this is important for our listeners to know, but can you explain what the difference is in peptides that are made in America?
For most brands, that is going to mean that they were shipped into America, fully complete lyophilized in their complete sealed vial form, and that they're going to then be third party tested and labeled in the States. That's for 90%, 98%. That's what made in the USA means. It means they were labeled here and tested here. There are smaller subcategory of manufacturers out there who have raw API. API means active pharmaceutical ingredient. They have that raw API shipped in, and then here in a US compounding facility, manufacturing facility, that gets then placed into vials, and then those vials are tested. So basically, it's like, where did the powder get put into the vial? That's really what it comes down to. There are no US APIs. They do not exist. So anyone who says that they have an active pharmaceutical ingredient that was manufactured and mass produced at scale in the US, they do not exist. I know this 100%. So like that's not a debatable. That's like if anyone goes that, it's just like not true. Are there some things here, some things there that are incredibly expensive that, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's some stuff, but there's nobody who's mass producing an API. I know because I know a super, super successful, very well-funded gentleman in the biologic space that has like incredible resources, and they went very far down the path of building it out, and they just came to the conclusion that there was it doesn't exist and it's too expensive to try and make right now. So, and that was from somebody who has unlimited money. So that's
Mm,
how I know. And I do
mhm,
business with this guy on other stuff. So it's like I know it's not bullshit and I know he just didn't make it up. But anyway, so like that's how it works. So like everything comes from somewhere else. Either generally speaking, China. There's some Thailand manufacturers, some Indian manufacturers. You get a lot of production coming out of China. And listen, China, like we buy a lot of stuff from China. China makes all kinds of stuff. They make all kinds of other medications. Like most pharmaceutical products are coming from China. So it's like what you want as a Chinese manufacturing partner or a company who's working with a Chinese manufacturing partner that is a high quality, high consistency manufacturer, right? Who's using good manufacturing practices, that has their certifications. I mean, China regulates this stuff too. It's not like so places get shut down over there and people get arrested and there's like rules, laws there too. Like so it's not because it's from China. It means it's like everything. It's all coming from China. So like, get over that. Then it's just like, what's the difference if it was like put in a bottle in China or put in a bottle here? If you go get it third party tested, and it all checks out. It's all checked out. It's like
mhm.
good. So
Yeah,
that's how it works.
because I think the difference is for people is they don't actually know what made in America
Totally.
constitutes, and that's why they think it's, like, tangibly made here. Like, I understand it's marketing at this point, but it's like it's important to inform the consumers so that they can be aware of what it is they are paying for when they're paying a premium for something, and if it matters to them to pay that premium to have something vialed here, That's
Totally.
you know?
Which is completely fine. And I mean, there's companies again like LabSource that I work with that are like those are super high quality, consistent manufacturing, v- all validated, all triple tested from Vanguard, level 3 verifications. And so they're like, and there you get a convenience, right? You get they're going to back it up. It's going to come quick. It's like, so there's a lot of reasons when people are getting into peptides. I'm like, find a really high quality US reseller, start there. And then, depending on where your journey goes, you can look at other things, but just like, a little bit of buyer beware, a little bit of caveat emptor because there's definitely tons of low quality, shoddy, fake, just straight up scams. I mean, like in being in this space, I have, and being experimental and like looking at building different relationships. I mean, I have absolutely been burned, so I mean, there's just sometimes you just want to know I can go here, I can get this thing, I can trust that it's going to be what they say it's going to be, and it's going to show up in 2 or 3 days, and I'm willing to pay for that peace of mind and that quality control. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I do too. So, I guess, is there any final thoughts or send off that you'd wanna tell the viewers at home?
Yeah, no, I think, I encourage everyone to get into peptides, explore, kind of find a pace, find somebody to like talk to or listen to or get coaching with. Certainly, love to have you follow along on my journey, my adventure on TikTok. You can find me at Barry the Biohacker. Also on Instagram, same handle, YouTube channel. Have a podcast, Optimize and Thrive, that we do long form content on. And right now we're on a very slow release cycle, which hopefully will change soon. And then instead of like school community, I have different educational resources and different ways to go. And again, there's if you need product recommendations or all that kind of stuff, I'm happy to share advice, any of that kind of stuff. Would love to continue on the conversation and just encourage you to be smart, do your research, and find high quality sources that you can trust, right? And if you do all that stuff, you're going to have a good experience.
Do your research. Absolutely. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you
Barry.
so much. I appreciate it. It was so great to talk. So good to be on the show. Thanks for the deep
Hey,
dive. And I can't wait to listen to the episode and hear more awesome stuff that you're doing. I'm a big fan.
thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, last night we had the big round table, and We had 965 people listening at one time on the live and 8,000 total views.
It's like a
Uh,
peptide Super Bowl.
it was a peptide Super Bowl. Exactly. I mean, it was pretty exciting to be on a live that big. The chat was an explosion. It was just like there was no keeping up with that chat. I don't know how my 4 mods did it, but they did it. Um, but yeah, it was pretty it was yeah. So the round table is something people are talking about now. So
I love it. Well, hopefully one of these days we'll be on the round table because I think it sounds super fun.
you are May 13th.
Perfect. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was still on.
Yeah.
Fishing for my invite. Okay.
May 13th.
Perfect. I will see you then
All right,
if
good.
I don't see
Mark
you
your
before.
calendar.
Okay, deal.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks,
awesome.
Barry.
All right, chat.
Have a good one.
Bye.
All right. Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here he is with everything you wish you would have wrote down. It's time for Fort Worth's Talkback.
All right, guys, that was a really great interview. I actually really enjoyed the conversation between CDJ and Barry. There was a lot of key information that really stood out to me, that I really enjoyed because it is one of the things that I can be able to relate to. One of the key things that they said is most people start wrong. They usually start with GLPs, fat loss, or like an injury. Um, and a lot of the times we come in there because of that, but we have no plan. There's not strategic. So they really went into depth into what you can be able to do. Very emphasized on research first and then stack a design. So choose a clear starting point instead of helicoptering into multiple peptides, which I am guilty of 100%. But as more and deeper that we get into the space, we have great leaders like Barry and CDJ that really break down the science and break down the foundation layer as far as to be able to guide a lot of us into a better path. So I really hope that you guys really do go back and rewind the tape to be able to listen to a lot of things because they went into mitochondria function on a lot of compounds like SLOOP, 5-amino, NAD, and they discussed about really building a stack that is structured based on your goals. So goal-based stacking is one of them and not FOMO stacking. Okay, guys, because we're all guilty of it, including myself. So that was a lot of great conversation there. And then one thing that also I am guilty of is the growth hormone. Not cycling properly, not understanding the life of the peptide, and really just listening to just be the protocol of what should be done with a growth hormone. And they really went into a little bit deeper conversation on how that can be cycled properly. So I hope you guys took away a lot of what I thought was very interesting in this interview. Because at the end of the day, like they touched on, there are two types of researchers, the ones that have the simple and strategic approach, and then the stackers like me.
Well,
No,
Fort Worth, I think you summed it up pretty well. Thank you so much for your stunning report. We greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate it. And I know for sure the Pepper fam greatly appreciates it as well.
I hope so. Because I get to enjoy these before them and really get into a lot of information that I see already in the space. And then you guys really touch on it to the point where it should relate to a lot of us because a lot of us do start out this way. And then we find people like you who can be able to guide us into a better direction just based on the information that you put out, and to be able to help us research the right way.
Oh, shucks. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm just trying to do my part. So, all right, Pepper fam, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Remember, this is education, not medical advice. Do your own research, talk to your doctor, never pay retail. I love you for being here. Seriously. And now that you know, go do more of what makes you happy. See you next time. The views expressed by our guests are their own. Neither Caitlin Jones, Fort Worth, CDJPepperz LLC, nor Rolling with the Tides endorse or verify any claims made by guests. This content is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Hey Pepper fam, you can head to CDJPepperz.com for educational resources on peptide research, including vendors, experimental context, and reconstitution references. I'm a paid partner of many companies, so I may earn a commission if you use my code CDJ or my links. Products are for research purposes only.